Game 1 of the 1990 championship, and the Wildcats dust the Brisbane Bullets by 6 points in Perth. It was then on to Boondall, and an NBL record crowd watched the home side level the series at 1 game apiece. Today, the season, the hopes and dreams of rookies and veterans comes down to 1 game. Today we crown new champions, and may the best team win.
It's on the line now. I mean, there's no tomorrows.
We haven't won anything yet. We've just leveled the series, and now we come down to the real hard work. It comes down to 1 last game of the year, and it'll be, it'll just be last man standing on Sunday.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is NBL Rewind, wherever you might be around Australia. Hashtag NBL Rewind, and no doubt, if you haven't watched it yet, you got to get to it. The game, 1990, deciding championship game, and well, it's been 30 years, Liam. It was very early. I speak for myself, but you and I are a very similar age. It was very early in our basketball-loving lives, and this is one of our earliest memories because this was a ripping team, a ripping championship, and led to ripping careers of so many, of which one of the men's going to join us in a split second. Hello to you.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, and we've got a ripping bloke that we're going to have a chat to. I loved this grand final series. I love this team. I love this player. This was one of the guys my old man and my coaches as a youngster growing up said, make sure you record his games, watch those tapes, and learn how to play the game from the point guard position.
I'll tell you the best thing about NBL Rewind, Liam, is we leave it out to other people to come up with the games. So we know where to start, because when it comes to Ricky Grace, there's like 200 different things we could have put up. So we're going to start, and we've got a very definitive starting point as we welcome the legend, Ricky Grace. Hello to you.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
30 years, a little more, nearly 31 since you got here. That first year, that first championship. It's this week anniversary. The emotions, they still flood back?
Yeah, I mean, I was only 8 years old when we won that championship, so I'm 38 now. And but yeah, from what I remember, and I do remember heaps, it was a great championship. We were going against a great team.
Mm-hmm.
Leroy Loggins, one of the all-time greats of the league. Derek Rucker had, a major impact on the league that first year. He was, leading scorer, probably leading assist, MVP of the league, MVP of the All-Star game. So, Andre Moore, they had Robert Sibley. I mean, they had some great players. And, it was a really, really tough series. And, we were, if we played them in a series 10 times, we might have won 5. They may have won 5, but luckily we won the one that counted.
Before we talk even more about this game and this series, because you're talking a tough series, it was an equally as tough series the series before, that semi-final series against North Melbourne, who were the reigning champs. So it wasn't like you just sort of rolled on in. It was a 3-game series. I think you won in overtime in that deciding game. So it was tough series after tough series. It was a hell of a playoff run.
Yeah, and North Melbourne was Perth's bogey team. They had knocked Perth out of the grand finals 2 or 3 years in a row before that. The last year being they had won by 55 points. And Cal Bruton, number was 55. And there was a lot of 55s going on at that time. I believe even Cal's mom passed away that year at 55. So it was a, tough year for the Cats the year before and a few years before. And for us to get over that hump, and I was actually on the bench. I fouled out. So I actually watched the overtime of the North Melbourne game from the bench. And so for me, it was just a relief when we got to the grand final. I felt like I had a new lease on life because the team was able to beat that bogey team in the semifinals with me on the bench. So I was just lucky and grateful that we had that opportunity in the grand final.
Let's go back a little step even further than that. I heard you talk with Lockie Reed yesterday and flag the importance of that final game of the regular season, something that I wasn't familiar with. What was, take us through the situation around that game, who it was against and what was on the line.
I believe it was against Gold Coast Rollers. So it was a game that we, were definitely favored to win. It was at home and it was a game, we obviously ended up winning, but before the game, there was a hell of a lot of tension because if we didn't win that game, well, then we would not have made the playoffs. And as a matter of fact, we won that game. And from my memory, we were tied for that sort of last playoff spot. But then we ended up fifth because of the tiebreakers, blah, blah, blah. But if we would have lost that game, our owner, Kerry Stokes, had told us that this was our last year. This was our last chance. And I'm looking around going, this is my first year. Well, too bad. It's your first and last chance. And so if we would have lost that game, well, there is no way I would be sitting here talking to you now because the owner had told us he was going to blow that team up if we didn't win the championship that year.
What was he like to play for? I mean, he's telling you that that he's going to blow the team up. A few weeks later, he's got you slapping yourselves in the face. What was your first impressions that opening year of your NBL career of ownership and that organization?
Kerry personally was the best owner I ever played for. I never had anyone treat me better. I never had anyone or seen anyone treat players better. I never had anyone seen an owner do everything possible to make sure that we were the most prepared team on and off the court. The year before, there was an airline strike, and Kerry chartered a plane and flew the guys, over east to actually play the game. So he was the best owner I ever played for. He treated you the best, and he expected the best. So from that point of view, it was great. But it was a bit of a crazy season. When I first arrived here, Alan Black was the coach, and then 3 games into it, Cal Bruton was the coach. and then we had, players go to jail. We had, players basically revolting, because of the way the coaching situation had been handled. And, I'm just a 23-year-old young fellow, who only stopped sucking his thumb about 4 years before that. So, I'm just a baby, man. And I'm sitting here with these grown men with these grown folk issues. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. So I wasn't going to quit because my mom didn't raise a quitter. I was in the 7th grade, thought about quitting the basketball team, and she didn't let me quit. She said, you had to finish the season. You don't have to go back, but you got to finish that damn season. So my plan was just to finish the season and then just find a career somewhere else or go back to the NBA and try out again.
Remarkable story.
Remarkable, yeah. Obviously, we're familiar with the turmoil at the start of the season. You guys go on the road. I think, you just beat Geelong, and then you got beat up by Westside Melbourne. Yeah. And then all of that takes place, right? The coaching change and Cal gets brought in as GM. When did things, because this is a remarkable story, and I love these stories about championship teams who overcame adversity. I imagine that there was a point in time here where the team was at risk of splitting, perhaps. What was the point? Do you remember a point or a meeting or a point where things got to their rock bottom?
It probably got, rock bottom when we made the coaching change, because it sort of blindsided a lot of the veterans on the team, and they weren't really happy with that process. So that was probably the bottom, but we're all professional. Everybody did their best to be professional, but they're grown men, and they were entitled to and they expressed their opinion to management, and then we moved on. But it took some time for us to gel. James Crawford, Alabama Slammer, was actually injured. So James was coming back, and then there was all that bit of turmoil there as well. So it took us a long time to actually get to know each other. I was this young 23-year-old, in Perth, single, ready to mingle, and, but balling. So, we were we were just getting to know each other. And, I can remember towards the end of the season, Eric Watterson came up to me and said, "Ricky, I got your back." That meant the world to me because he was the first person on the team to say that. And then Trevor Torrance came to me, almost that same week, and said, "Ricky, I got your back," and that was really comforting to me. And that was, maybe a week or two before the season finished, so so we, I guess, compared to maybe like a tennis player coming into a tennis tournament underdone, and then they sort of play themselves into tournament shape, and then by the grand final or by the tournament final, well, then they're clicking and they're playing their best tennis. Well, that's sort of how we did it in the playoffs. We sort of we did sweep Melbourne in the first round, but still don't think we were playing our best basketball. And then we slowly got better and better and better, and then played our best game in game 3, which you just saw.
We're working our way slightly back in the timeline here, but you flagged recently the experience of watching that All-Star game that you referred to earlier in Perth. Derek out there as the MVP, and you're sitting in the stands. I mean, what were your emotions that night? Was your blood boiling watching him play in front of your fans?
Man, there was no water in the pot anymore. It had boiled all out. It was just steam, right? So, but full credit to Derek. He came in and set the bar. He came in firing. He was like leading the league in points, assists. And then he flew over here to Perth, and, all the All-Stars did. And, I obviously was looking at those guys thinking I'm just as good or better. And as an athlete that's always trying to be the best, to see someone, coming on your home turf and take over the way he did, was something that really motivated me. And, it was the perfect final or the perfect ending for me to be able to hold the grand final MVP trophy of the championship team, which, obviously meant more to me. And because I was just coming off losing the national championship game at the University of Oklahoma, there was this doubt in my mind that, am I ever going to get over that hump? Am I ever going to win that championship? So to actually do it personally against Derek, who had set the bar so damn high, and the Bullets, who, were just an amazing, talented team, for me to finally get over the hump was probably the most satisfying, rewarding victory for me ever.
What did you know about the NBL? You mentioned college, which we'll get to in a moment. What did you know about phone call or however the fax or however telegram, whatever happened in the late 80s? What did you know? Nothing?
Nothing. I just knew Australia spoke English. Mm-hmm. And I had the choice to go between either Holland or Australia. And back then you didn't have internet. I thought about going to the library to do some research and just see where Australia was on the map. I thought it was next to Austria, because that's just how Americans are when it comes to geography. Americans tend to think the world revolves a little bit around them, or us. So I just hopped on a plane. I didn't know whether I was going to Perth or Kalgoorlie. I just said, look, I know the weather's nice. They speak English. So I'm just going to go see what happens.
And in your mind, was it a 1-year thing? Was it like, get to the NBL, do my thing, mature, learn, experience, back to the NBA, or at least?
It was more a 2-year.
2-year?
I signed a 2-year deal. I graduated in 1988. I got my degree. I finished playing in 88. Mm-hmm. I got drafted by Utah Jazz. I didn't make it, so I went back and got my degree in 1989. So then I tried out for the expansion team, Minnesota Timberwolves, in 1989, and did make that. So then I was playing in the NBA, the CBA, the second tier league to the NBA. And I just hated that, those small bus rides, shitty, players are just all selfish, trying to put up numbers to get to the NBA. And the way I played, is a more unselfish game. And it didn't really fit that style of CBA, so I just hated that. So I knew after I went back and got my degree from University of Oklahoma, I knew that I didn't feel I was good enough to be in the NBA, and I wasn't at that time. So my plan was to come here, work on my craft for 2 years. I gave myself 2 years to work on my craft. And then I would, and then I was, in my mind, I would then go back and give the NBA another shot. But those 2 years, we won a championship, both of those 2 years with the Wildcats. And it seemed like Perth really appreciated me. And I really started to enjoy my time in Perth. We had put all that turbulence of the first year behind me, and I was sort of embedding myself into the city of Perth, into the community, and into all of Western Australia. So, obviously the rest is history, and Perth became my home.
Just before I let you go, Liam, as I've always said, winning solves, not always correctly, but winning solves and changes everything in sport. And that's a perfect example right there, because the Perth Wildcats we see today on and off the court started with you. Started with that crew in 1990, and it's the most powerful organization in the league, both on and off the court now. So there you go. Winning, Liam, I've told you, it changes everything.
Well, and it didn't, I wouldn't say it started with me. Thank you very much for that. But it probably more started in 87 when, Bob Williams bought the team and he brought in Cal, and then Cal brought in James Crawford and Tiny. And I think he brought in a couple of guys from over East, role players. So that's when the run stun, have some fun, sell out crowds, breaking back boards, basketball sort of took off. So that was 87. And then 87, 88, 89, the boys just had that bogey of North Melbourne. And then I came in 90, which was the last piece of the puzzle. And I guess when you're that last piece of the puzzle, well, then, you might get a little more credit than you deserve, but I'll take it.
Just on that, do you remember your first meeting with Cal Bruton? The first time you met Cal? He's such an exuberant person.
You're about to start something now. You're about to start something because my memory is a little bit different than Cal's, okay? So my memory, and then, you got to be fair and get Cal on here for a rebuttal. But my memory is that there is an agent, Doc Atkins. Doc Atkins brought Leroy Loggins out here, Mark Davis, James Crawford, Derek Rucker, myself, Steve Carfino. He's the one that saw me playing in that CBA that I told you I was so unhappy about. And he slipped a card under my, I don't know how it got there, but it was under my motel door, even if you want to call it a motel door. And so it said, if you're interested in playing overseas, give him a call. So I gave him a call, and we talked about, different places. And it was a coincidence that Steve Carfino was riding. I was up in Quad City, which is near Iowa, and Steve played at the University of Iowa. And he was actually trying out for the same CBA team that I was. But I think he was just there to get a workout because he's had contracts over here. And I heard him talking about how great Australia was. I was just sitting in the seat behind him. He wasn't even talking to me, and probably doesn't even know this conversation exists, that I heard this conversation. But he was saying how great Australia was and how amazing he was doing over here, like he was killing it, man. I'm averaging 25 and, boom, and I'm Mr. Magic. They call me Mr. Magic and this and that. And I'm sitting behind him thinking, I just played against you, and I think I might have you. I'm thinking, So then I got to my hotel room, and then there's this card saying, do you want to go play in Australia? I'm going, well, no disrespect to Steve, but I'm in. So, it just so happened that it was Perth. It just so happened that it was Cal, and, who knows? I mean, sometimes I think if I would have gone, what would have happened if I would have gone to Brisbane and Rucker was on Perth team and I was on Brisbane team? What would happen? Who knows? We could be, who knows? But, everything definitely worked out for me.
So I'm picturing that this would have been around the time, maybe just after Drewy's Final Four, his championship game run with Seton Hall. Did Did watching that and seeing him play give you a sense of Australian players in any way?
Not really. I mean, Drewy was playing for Seton Hall, and I'm a Southern boy. I'm a Dallas, Texas boy, and went to University of Oklahoma. And I do recall watching Drew play at Seton Hall, just because I was a basketball junkie. And I knew he was a great player, but I couldn't say that had any bearing on my decision. That's New York, East Coast sort of thing. So for me, yes, I obviously respected Drew. And then when I ended up playing against him here in Australia, I was obviously aware that he was a great player. But no, that really didn't affect my decision at all.
You mentioned playing for Oklahoma and that your own run to the championship game, going down to Kansas just by a couple of buckets. What are your strongest memories of playing there, the great teammates that you had and that run to the Final Four?
Oh man, biggest disappointment in my life, losing that championship game, that, and then losing to, Lithuania in the Olympics in 2000, were just the two lowlights of my life. But at the same time, they were the highlights of my life 2 hours earlier. It was the highlight of my life to play in a national championship game. We had beat Kansas twice that year by 4 points. We beat them because they were in our conference, the Big 8, which is now the Big 12. We had a really strong conference. Kansas State also made the Final Four that year. And so we had 3 teams. I think they made the Final 8 of Kansas State. So, Larry Brown was the coach, Hall of Famer. Very hard to beat someone that smart with a great team like Danny Manning, who was the first pick of the draft the next year. But we had 3 first-rounders on our team as well. Mookie Blaylock, Harvey Grant, Stacey King were on our team, although Stacey and Mookie were juniors and Harvey and I were seniors. But, man, it was a great game. I think they missed 3 shots in the first half. The score was tied 50-50. And we either turned them over or they hit the shot, But I got great memories. I was one of only 3 players in the history of the NCAA to have 200 assists and 100 steals in the same season. Mookie was also, we did it in the same year, in the same backcourt, and it only had been done one other time previously, and we did it together, So a lot of those records still stand at Oklahoma. I can remember the headline one game being Virginia scores 99 and loses by 50, So, we beat them 149-99 in a 40-minute game. So it was just the start of, we were sort of the first, us and UNLV were the first to come down and pull up for a 3. I can remember Billy Packer and Dick Vitale and those guys saying, that's not a good shot. You can get that shot at any time, So we I believe, were the beginning of started that style of play. And, we were dancing on the sideline and cabbage patching and doing all that. And people thought we were ghetto and hood and, all of that. But we were just enjoying ourselves. And, we sort of, us and UNLV sort of transcended that college game. And more players started going to schools that were playing that run and gun style of play because that's what they wanted to play. So other schools then adjusted.
Which is so much of, and you touch on it, which is so much of what we see today. If you turn on and watch any collegiate, really sport, but basketball in particular, we see that 99% of the time, people just running and jacking threes that 30 years ago, 40 years ago was a bad shot. So,
yeah, the only thing we weren't ahead of the game on our shorts. Our shorts were still very, very tight and very, very, very high. And I was embarrassed to tie my shoes because I was afraid I would expose some things. So that's the only thing we weren't ahead of the game on. We're still a little bit behind on the length of those shorts. So don't go back and Google that, please.
They might have got shorter when you arrived in Perth. I think Trevor's were probably shorter.
Hey man, yeah. Well, by the time we got to Perth, I was started heading in that long short area. So the Wildcats actually bought me some tights. So
Yes.
I actually, if you go back and look at it, you'll see me in the short shorts, but I had the tights, underneath. And then they actually ordered me, once they figured out I was pretty good, they actually ordered me some longer shorts, and I was the only one on the team that had these long shorts.
If that's not a vote of confidence, you got a contract for the next year. I don't know what is.
Yeah, well, I got that in the second year after they tore up that first contract.
Let's talk about that second year, because you're coming off a championship. As you touched on, the turmoil and the ups and downs and the roller coaster, you win a title. What I'm assuming was a hell of a lot of different feeling going to 91 than it was in different parts of 1990.
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. Well, I mean, I was pissed off. I came into 91 pissed off because Cal, how many coaches win an NBL championship and don't get a contract?
That's true.
So now I'm dealing with the man that brought me out here, who I was loyal to.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden won the championship. I fly home, I fly back, and we got a different coach. So for me, I wasn't very happy still coming into 1991. So, and then they brought in this guy, Murray Arnold, who was well credentialed, but I wasn't happy with it. And I can remember the preseason tournament we had in Melbourne, and I was just playing like I playing with an attitude, preseason tournament. And I can remember Murray brought me in when we got back to Perth, and he said, "Ricky, I'm looking at the video, and I don't think you're trying." And I had never, ever in my life had a coach say that to me, and to be honest, probably wasn't, and so, I said to myself, I will never, ever, ever have a coach say that to me again, because there is a level of professionalism and respect that you have to bring to this game. And I don't care if I'm playing outside right now, I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best to beat you. But I was so far in my head at that time for that weekend that, I didn't perform at my best. Luckily, it was a preseason tournament. And then for that 1991 season, I got my head together, and the rest of the team, we had a great year. I think we went 22-4 that year. I think that was one of the best seasons of any NBL team ever, and ended up winning the championship. But because we played such a defensive style, which was different from what Cal had brought, Murray was all about protecting the paint. He was all about the percentages, So it wasn't the most exciting brand, which I think hurt our brand. But I still think that was one of the best teams of all time, that 1991 team.
Was that the right conversation for him to have with you at that moment?
Of course. Honesty. Be honest, be a man. And I respected that, and if he wouldn't have had that conversation, who knows how long I would have stayed in that little funk, So no, he sat me down man to man and looked me in the eye, and I respected that. And I responded. And
you guys had a rookie, Andrew Vlahov, if I remember correctly, for that back-to-back season. What did he bring to the team?
Man, well, first, we were surprised that we were going to get him because he had graduated Stanford. He had 4 amazing years there. He was a respected international player, even at a young age, right? Some superstars internationally. And he had been invited back to the Los Angeles Lakers veterans camp. So we actually weren't planning on having Andrew. And, Kerry Stokes, he did the deal. And we were, next thing you know, we had a top 5 player on top coming off of a championship team a year. So having Andrew, I always said was my big brother on the court. Because a lot of team strategy was to cut the head off the chook. They considered me the head of the chook. And I can remember, a few teams at the beginning of the game, first play of the game, they say, just let him drive. And all 5 of them just knocked the crap out of him, because I was always in the paint, and that would try and, soften me up a bit. But my big brother, Vlahoff, would make sure he took names. And whoever came at me would feel the wrath of Andrew Vlahoff. So he was my big brother on the court. He looked after me. One of the most intelligent players I've ever played with, pound for pound, the strongest guy I've ever played with. And I've seen him, when boys are being boys and wrestling and all that, I've seen him pin some 7-foot people, pound for pound, he's the strongest guy I've ever seen. So, no, it was just a pleasure and, lucky that we ended up with Andrew.
A few years later, you have that championship series with against the Giants, DMAC. And I remember chatting to you a while back, and you've said this elsewhere a number of times as well, how there was some personal motivation involved in that series, because he'd come in and he'd made a bit of a splash, and you were like, this is my league. Like, I'm the best point guard in this league, and it's time for me to reprove that. At what point before he arrived, in your first few years, did you start to feel like that? Like, you know what? This is my competition.
I felt like that from the day I arrived. That was my goal, was for this to be my competition. I mean, even when I was, on that bus listening to Steve Carfino, before I even got here, and then was offered that contract. Well, then I thought, why not make that your competition? DMAC is still, one of the greatest, to ever play this game too. I think, people, talk about me, but DMAC is right there. And, some would say he may even been better, and they would have some really, really good points that they would, make. So it was, I knew Daryl, and, I just loved and respected him as a man. To me, I didn't have that same sort of violent, aggressive, wanting to kill, like I wanted to kill Rucker. I wanted to kill him. Like Copeland hated me. Okay. Copeland hated me. I didn't hate Copeland. Copeland hated me, but I just had such a love and admiration for DMAC as a man, I played against him in junior college. I was recruited by Texas A&M. He ended up going to Texas A&M. And so I had always sort of followed him from afar. And I just had a respect for him that, I don't know, I just, something about him as a man just always touched me, because of the things that he had to go through to make it in New York City, being such an amazing dad, bringing his kids out of New York to, look after them and be the father he's been for them, So for DMAC, I did feel like this man was about to come take over my territory. And they had won the championship in 1993. 1994. And then they were about to go back to back in 1995. And if they would have won, they would have gone to London to play the Houston Rockets. And, this would have been DMAC's league. And it still ended up being DMAC's league as well, So that was I was lucky to have James Crawford on my team, because James Crawford dominated game 3. Which was the game that allowed us to, obviously win the championship and then fly to London. It was funny because game 3 was played in Perth about noon, and the flight was booked to go to London right after the game. So I'm walking into the game, and I see North Melbourne walking into the game at the same time. They're walking the stadium at the same time, and they got all these bags packed. They got big old bags packed, like they about to go somewhere for like a week or two or something. And I'm going, I'll be damned. y'all about to take them bags back to Melbourne. Y'all about to get on that plane to London. We will be getting on that plane to London in about 5 hours. So luckily, like I said, James Crawford just played the game of his life, and we ended up winning that championship and heading over to London.
How much of the cherry on top was the McDonald's Open and that? You win a championship and then you're jumping on a plane. But how much did it mean to you to have that opportunity?
It meant it legitimized the way I felt as a player. When we went to London and we lost to the Rockets, but we beat Real Madrid. And Real Madrid, everybody respects Europe as, I guess, the second best league behind the NBA. So for us, and for me personally, it just legitimized it. It made me feel legitimate that I not only was one of the best in Australia, but one of the best in the world.
Did you feel, you mentioned that you talk about legitimizing personally, and then of course beating Real Madrid, which is one of the best wins. We've spoken about it before, one of the best wins I think in NBL history. But did you feel a little bit of that? We need to sort of legitimize the NBL on the world stage as well. For
sure. I didn't feel like people respected us. They looked at us kind of like we're cute, you know. Oh yeah, you know, Australia, they're cute, you know. And I remember Danny Ainge was over there. He was doing television, and just sort of the questions he was asking us, you know, just seemed, you know, just didn't resonate well with me. You know, I didn't feel like they were respectful. It felt like he was talking to us like we were cute, you know. So for us, you know, we really had our eye on that game. You know, Houston beat us pretty well. I don't think we had run all of the champagne out of us until about the third quarter because, you know, we celebrated the whole way there and then, you know, hopped off the plane and had to play within, you know, 24 hours. So wasn't the best conditions to play the best team in the world under, but we got all the cobwebs out against Houston, and then we really represented ourselves well against Real Madrid.
Yeah, because I just wish you guys had been able to make a shot in that first quarter and the first sort of 75 field goal attempts you guys had.
Chandon, baby. Moe Chandon.
Hey, we skipped over a couple of things we need to hit on in that 93 season. Obviously, you have that grand final series, that championship series against the Tigers. They have that big moment on the floor, Drewy and Lindsay. You win grand final MVP, the only player in NBL history to have won it on a losing side. How did that sit with you?
Man, I was so disappointed, but I was just, this is going to sound bad, but I don't give a damn. The only thing I was thinking is I'm just glad Copeland didn't get it. That's all I was thinking. I was just thinking I'm just glad he didn't get it because, you know, we talk shit, you know.
He had a pretty good series.
Who?
Copes.
He deserved it. He deserved the MVP. He deserved it. So I didn't mind taking his MVP trophy because he deserved that damn trophy. That was his trophy. It's sitting. I wish I had it so I could show it to him. That was his trophy, man. Kobe deserved that damn trophy, you know. But it was an honor, you know. I mean, I must have been balling though. I must have been balling to actually get it. And I remember getting the fourth foul in the first half. It was either Eddie Crouch or Billy Mildenhall, and they were my two favorite refs because they were the best, and they would talk to you, communicate with you, and they were just the most fairest, honest refs around. But I just really, you know, that call really, really, really affected us, and so it was a fourth foul in the first half, and once I got my full foul in the first half, well, Copeland, he was a shark in water. And he knew there was already couldn't stop him. And then for him to now have to play passively, well, then he just went to town. And and they won that game 3 on our court, which, was probably, how I talked about how great 90 was winning in Brisbane. Well, I'm sure for Melbourne in 93 winning in Perth, and, just rubbing it in our faces was something that they really enjoyed and treasured. And it's probably the highlight of a lot of their careers as well.
Did you have the 10-day in your back pocket at that time?
No, not at all. Not at all. Dick Ham was the assistant coach for the Atlanta Hawks, and he had come out to Perth Athletes in Action. Dick Ham used to do a lot of work with them, and then there's an SBL team here called Lakeside Lightning, and it's run by the Baptist Church, and Dick Ham was associated with them. So they would bring him out every year, and then he ended up just coming to Wildcats training. So he came to our training and watched us play, and, I met him, talked to him a little bit, but that was it. We won. We played in that grand final. It was the next day. We went out on Kerry's boat, and Moe Shandong. So I got home about 3 that morning, and Dave Hancock, the assistant coach, called me at 5 that morning. And he said, "Ricky, the Atlanta Hawks want you on the plane at midnight." I said, "Dave, I'm already in trouble for getting in at 3. Don't be calling, playing jokes." And I hung up the phone, right? So he rang me back. And said, "Ricky, don't hang up this damn phone. I'm telling you, I just spoke with Dick, and Dick and the Atlanta Hawks want you over there in Atlanta, and they want you on the midnight flight." So I'm okay, sat up and, boom. Next thing you know, I'm on the midnight flight to Atlanta, and 48 hours after that phone call from Dave, well, I'm sitting in Chicago Stadium, and now you're Chicago Bulls, and I'm still Moe Shandong, I'm going, again. So, and then, 44 minutes later in the game, Grace, good out there, I'm going, yeah. And then I score 4 points. I'm going, wait, I scored 4 points in 4 minutes. I reckon I could, they put me out there 20 minutes. Hey, shit, So it was, but to answer your question, no, I had no idea. It was a surprise, and, it was a great time. I was playing good ball, probably some of the best ball that I've ever played. And at that time, I felt like, earlier I mentioned 2 years, to get up to NBA standard. And by that time, I felt like I was at NBA standard. Unfortunately, the season had already started, and I didn't really know the plays. And, they decided to go with a veteran who was more familiar with the NBA. They invited me back to camp for the next year, but I would have had to miss some of the Wildcat season and all that. So I just respectfully declined to go back for him to play for Atlanta. And by that time, I was starting to really get entrenched and embedded into the Perth community here. So I decided to just be happy here in Australia.
Did that kind of tick that NBA box for you emotionally and psychologically? So I've been out on that floor. I know I'm at that level. I don't need to chase that anymore.
It did a little bit. It ticked it in pencil.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I played in the Olympics in 2000 and played well in the time that I was given against international NBA players then that's when it ticked it in pen,
Mm-hmm.
where that's when I really felt like, okay, in the right situation, I could do well in the NBA. I never felt like I was a starting point guard, in the NBA, but I did feel like, even though Mookie Blaylock, who played alongside me, was a starting point guard for many years in the NBA, and I didn't really see too much difference in talent between Mookie and I, to be honest. But in the NBA, you have to be great at something, and I was probably good at everything, but not great at anything. So I was more good across the board, whereas in NBA, you need to be great at something, and that I wasn't.
That's interesting because that makes sense in terms of the skill set, but what you were great at was the ability to run a game and run a team and sense a moment. And you need to be like the starter, playing starting minutes and being the guy for that to really show.
Correct. And that I didn't feel like I would have ever gotten those starter type minutes. And when you're bringing in a role player, well, then that role player needs to have an immediate impact.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, when I grew up, though, that's the way you were taught. You were taught to be an all-rounder, to do everything, to, you know, whatever the team needs to win, that's what you do. If you need to focus on defense, that's what you do. If you need to focus on, you know, setting picks or getting someone else involved, that's what you do. And that's the type of player I was. I was the type of player that I'm just going to do what it takes to win, you know, and you know, I'm a real student of the game. I'm a real strategist of the game. At the end of every game, Channel 7 used to give the coach a VCR cassette of the game, and then they'd give me a VCR cassette of the game. And I would go straight home after the game, and I would watch it. And I would only watch it in, you know, I would just watch the defense. You know, there's an average of 100 trips a game. There's an average of 100 shots a game, you know, 80 field goal attempts. You'll see about 20, 30 free throws. So there's an average of 100 shots. And if you just watch the defense go back, 100 times, well, you'll start to see a trend. And then I'd watch it offense, you know, just offense. 100 times, you'll start to see a trend. So I used to do that after the game. And, you know, I get home about 10 o'clock and I'd watch that till about 12. Then I'd go to the club, you know, whereas most people just going to the club. Well, no, I've already watched that game. I already know what happened and boom. And the next day, you know, that Sunday, I would get up and I would watch our upcoming opponent. Same thing. Boom, 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 100, boom, 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 100. And then I'd go to the sauna, get that Moe Chandon out, and then I, you know, water up. So by Monday, I'm fresh. I'm fresh Monday, everyth's out, and I got my game plan in my head. And that was a little advantage that I felt that I was getting because I didn't know how many players were actually doing that. So once Monday started, physically, I'm fresh, I'm hydrated, I'm ready to go. And mentally, I already know what we did from last week's game. I'm already very much, you know, learned from that. And I'm already mentally prepared for the team that's coming up.
Where did you get that from? Did you learn that at Oklahoma?
I've always been a student of the game. I've just always, when I was little, I'm the middle of three boys, and I used to always want to play with my older brother, you know, and the only thing they would let me do was pass the ball inbounds. You know, I'm 8, they're 13, you know. Okay, you can throw it in, you know. And then I get 13 and they're about 18. And I learned that if I pass the ball to them and make them look good, well, then they'll let me play. So I also, just from the beginning, I always played the game in a way where I was trying to make other people look good or other people better so that I could get picked, you know? And so that's just the way I always played. I always played trying to make other people better, you know? And yes, you know, you always want to be better than your player, and that's a given. So and my mom's a nurse. She's always looking after people, you know, and she has this innate ability to feel what people are feeling. And I think I have that same ability. Like, I know when somebody needs the ball. I know when somebody don't need to have the ball. This is importantly, you know, and those sort of things. I remember a few of my shooting guards used to be pissed off at me sometimes because they feel like they're open, but I didn't hit them. Well, you open, but you ain't in rhythm right now. And I know that, and I see that. So I'm not going to give you that right now. James needs to touch it right now. You know, he ain't touched it in 3 trips, and Bruce Bolden just scored twice on him. So I know James feeling a little funny right now. So I need to get the ball to James, not you, you know? So, you know, those sort of, you know, I just felt like I could read the game, you know, and read people and their rhythms and where they want the ball, where they're best, where they're not best. Those are things that I just love to study and love to do.
And that's what we were talking about before. That right there is your most world-class basketball skill.
Yeah, well, and it's a skill that is lost. I don't think it's a skill that, because it doesn't get you paid. So, but you do win. I mean, if you're 6'8" and 250 pounds like LeBron James, he plays that way.
He does.
He plays that way, and that's the mindset that he has. But you don't see a lot of people have that, play with that mindset in this era.
Rick, you mentioned it before. You get here in 1990, or you start to put some wheels in motion. You got no idea where Australia is, and then you end up marching into a stadium at a home Olympic Games, a decade later. Like, just a remarkable situation. What was it like?
Oh man, amazing. I remember being in Wollongong in the lead up to the Olympics, and after the game, we played a warm-up game in Wollongong, the Boomers, and Andrew Gaze got a phone call, and then you could see all 32 teeth, and then he hung up, and he said, "Guys, I'm going to be carrying the flag," and we just jumped up and hugged him, and grown men, just tears of joy that Gazy was Drewy was going to be carrying that flag out, leading the country in Australia. And that was probably my proudest Australian moment, was just being a part of that, just being a part of that experience was, man. So I'm so appreciative that first Barry Bonds, the coach, wrote me a letter to help me to get my citizenship in time, because you had to be a citizen 3 years and 3 days before the open ceremony date. You just couldn't become a citizen 2 days before the Olympics and rock up. You had to be a citizen 3 years and I think it was 3 days before open ceremony date. So Barry helped me get that citizenship done. And then the players, they were such a tight-knit group, a tight-knit nucleus, that I was wondering how I was going to fit into that. And they were just so accommodating, to me, and just allowed me to infiltrate their culture. Gaze, Brackey, Longley, Vlahoff, Ronaldson, Shane, all those boys had been together. And man, those are intimate times, and they allowed me to share that with them. So for me, I was just really appreciative and grateful that I was on the team, particularly after the Atlanta disappointment, but then B, just to be a part of that, whole experience is one that I'm so grateful to all those guys for allowing me to experience that with them.
Growing up, for basketballers, any young athlete, it's always, I say, NBA. Was the Olympics something that was in your mind as a kid, or did it just grow when the opportunity started to present itself? How did it all sit?
The NBA wasn't my dream.
Okay.
As a kid, when I was a kid and you think of NBA players, they weren't living lavish lifestyles. It's not like I was a kid watching, Walt Frazier or Willis Reed or Bill Bradley playing for the New York Knicks and Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain playing for the Los Angeles Lakers. I didn't see them pulling up in no major, huge cars or mansions, or I didn't, as a matter of fact, I don't think the NBA was, I just love the game.
Mm-hmm.
I just love the game. I love to compete. And my number one goal as a kid was to play on TV. That's what I wanted to do, because I was like in the 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade. And then there was this guy named Spud Webb, who I grew up with. Spud grew up about a 5-minute walk from my house. We went to the same high school. He's about 4 years older. Well, I saw Spud play on TV at North Carolina State. And when I saw him play on TV, I saw how our whole community shut down to watch Spud play on TV. So that was my goal. My goal was, I want to play on TV like Spud, And, when I went to the University of Oklahoma, I played on TV. So my goal when I played basketball was to be good enough to get a scholarship, because my mom was always stressing. I say, Mom, I slam dunked today. And she'd say, where's your report card? So she was always about education. You got to get a good education. You got to get a good education. Ricky, what do you want to do? I don't know what I want to do. I just know what I don't want to do. I don't want to do what they doing. But so she said, well, you got to get a good education. Well, how the hell am I going to get a good education? We broke. Scholarship. Okay, scholarship. Hell, I can't sing. I can't dance. So shit, and as an African-American, unfortunately, and when I was growing up, we thought the only way you get out the hood was either sing, dance, or play sport. And that's just being frank. So for me, I thought, well, I better get good at one of these damn sports. So I really focused on basketball because I picked that up a little bit better. Gridiron, wasn't good. I hate outdoors, baseball's outdoors. I hate being cold, wet. I'm soft when it comes to that sort of stuff. So basketball was my sport. And I focused on basketball. I chose basketball so I could get a good education, and I wanted to play on TV.
Fascinating to hear you talk about opportunities, pathways, ways to open doors to achieve the things you want to do in life, because of course that's what you're doing these days with the Girls Academy, is trying to provide those types of opportunities. Does it feel like that for you, that kind of like
Yes.
that full circle, trying to create that now for those girls to what you were doing growing up?
Yeah, I had a mentor as well as my mom worked 2 jobs. She raises a single parent, 3 boys, single parent. So, she worked 16 hours a day and then slept for 8. So basically, she didn't raise me, the streets raised me, but there's one thing she kept tabs on was my report cards, my grades. The streets raised me, and I had a mentor at this rec center named Mr. O'Neill. He's the one that was like the father figure for me. And Mr. O'Neill, again, was that mentor that I listened to. So without Mr. O'Neill, I wouldn't have made good decisions. I'm not saying every decision I made was a good decision, but most of them, So when I was presented with the issue of here in Australia, that there was no support for Aboriginal girls, where there was millions and millions of dollars being put towards Aboriginal boys programs, being raised by a single mom, having 3 daughters, coming from a country where they get a lot of things wrong in America, but they get a lot of things right. And one thing they got right is they have what's called Title IX. And that's whatever you do for one sex, you have to do for the other. And I just didn't understand, how can I go to these schools and you see the boys with all of this support and the girls eating on, sitting on the grass. Mm-hmm. So I just decided to, do my best to increase the awareness of the need for programs for Aboriginal girls. And that's what I've been doing. And it's not about sport, it's about education. It's about getting a good education, because knowledge is power. Again, in the era that I grew up in, there was an organization called the NAACP, and it was the National, I think, American Allegiance for Colored People or something like that, and their motto was, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. So everything that I do is about using your mind, about being smart, about being strategic. That's the way I played. And that's the way I live, So for me, Mr. O'Neill, that mentor, helped instill that in me. And I just wanted to provide a mentoring program for these girls, these high school girls, where they could have mentors, because so many of them come from single homes where only their mom is raising them, only their nana, their grandma is raising them. And it's very similar to the African-American community, where too high of a proportion of kids are raised in those scenarios. So I just have worked my ass off for the last 16 years now, to try and increase the awareness of the need for programs for Aboriginal girls, because we're good at it. I'm so proud of what I was able to do in basketball, where I finished up with a Hall of Fame career. But I have to be honest, I'm even more proud to have recently received the Queen's Award and an Order of Australia Award for the work that I've done in this space, And so, this is a tough space to work in, but I signed up for it. And I'm really proud of the staff. We have 150 full-time staff now. Over 70% of those are Aboriginal women, and they are the strength of this program. And I, again, just like with the Wildcats, are around a lot of great people, but I'm getting the credit. So that's just been the way I've lived. I've always tried to be strategic. I've always tried to surround myself with great people, and then those people actually pull me up, and that's basically how I go about it.
You've been doing such great work, mate. What are the next steps with the academy?
Well, we have over 11,000 alumni now. So we have over 11,000 girls that have come through the program. So I'm hoping that now that we're getting them to school, we're getting them graduated, now we want to get them jobs and make sure that they always have meaningful employment. So the next thing now is to focus on that alumni that have finished school, and just to ensure that they have meaningful employment pathways. So we're working with the corporates, we're working with government, and we're working with these. We're about to try and put something in place for those 11,000 alumni to ensure that they have meaningful employment.
Amazing. Just an amazing effort, and continues to grow and grow and grow. And you speak about how proud you are of that, and well, you should be. And it's just been for a small kid who just wanted to be on TV, what a career it has been in a much different country, much different world than the one you grew up, mate. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat to you and watch back on these games and reminisce. And as I touched in off the top, there's 300 different games I think we could have shown, Ricky, and they would have all been as entertaining and as fun to watch. So I'm glad someone made that decision for us. Liam, always let Liam have the last word. Do you have one before we let Ricky go?
No, well, our man here's got a big job to do. He's a part of the selection panel for the Boomers. We won't grill him over that.
Hey, Ricky, one of us is the journalist and one of us isn't. But yeah, no, I like where your head's at, Liam.
No. He's been very, very generous with his time. We won't put him on the hot seat, but it's been a pleasure, mate, as always, and it's been a real pleasure to go back and walk through with you on your whole highly decorated, wonderful career.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I mean, it's you could have picked any of 300 games, but I would have either been shooting a set three or driving, doing a layup, or doing an assist. I would have been going left.
All lefter.
All left. Left or lefter. Or straight. So you could have picked any game. I would have been doing the same damn thing. But it's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for what you guys are doing for the game of basketball. You guys, it's hard making it look easy. And, you guys are making it look easy. So I know how hard you must be working. So thanks for everything you're doing, and thanks for making me look good today.
Hashtag NBL Rewind to get involved. If you haven't seen the Game 3 championship game from 1990, jump on at NBL, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, wherever you get your NBL content, check it out. Hashtag NBL Rewind to join the conversation, and we will see you next week for NBL Overtime.